Welcome back to the War Room. We're diving into some Armies of Renown again. Today we're going to be looking at the Kharadron Overlords Army of Renown and their Regiments of Renown. You've probably seen them on the battlefield a whole lot more lately, especially the Sky-Port Profiteers Regiment of Renown. We're seeing it a lot in this edition, and it's very, very strong. But we're going to start with the Armies of Renown first, and we'll get to the Regiments second. So the first one is the Pioneer Outpost. Your roster options are the Arcanaut Admiral, the Etheric Navigator, Endrin Master with Endrin Harness, any Kharadron Overlords infantry units, the Gruntstock Hauler, and you cannot include Regiments of Renown. So the battle traits: the initial investment, once per turn per army in any hero phase, each friendly auto Endrin can move 2d6 inches but cannot finish that move in combat. Bring your Endrin dock, get those guys out into the battlefield, get them out doing stuff. And then settling accounts, once per turn per army at the end of any turn. You can only use this ability if you have not used any code abilities this turn, and if a friendly auto Endrin was destroyed this turn by an enemy unit. For the rest of the battle, each time a friendly auto Endrin is removed from the battlefield, before removing it, inflict D3 mortal damage on each enemy unit within 3 inches of that auto Endrin. You're just trying to zoom these guys out into combat. As they die, they explode and do D3 mortals to everybody within 3 inches. And then aggressive acquisitions, once per turn per army at the end of any turn. You can only use this ability if you have not used any code abilities this turn, and if there is a friendly pioneer unit in each large quarter of the battlefield. Each of those units must be more than 6 inches from all other large quarters of the battlefield and not in combat. For the rest of the battle, enemy units cannot be set up within your territory or within 9 inches of an objective that you control. So this is kind of going to affect the board state as a whole. The code abilities are settling accounts, aggressive acquisitions, and secure investments, which we're going to get to in a second. But this just means that units can't teleport into your territory or within 9 inches of an objective that you control, which is really good because it allows you to hold on to objectives. You can't really get backlined as easily. So I like that a lot. And then secure investments, once per turn per army at the end of any turn. You can only use this ability if you have not used any code abilities this turn, and if any enemy units that were within 3 inches of your Zantari Eldrin Drakh were destroyed this turn. For the rest of the battle, ignore the Ren characteristic of combat attacks that target friendly, non-infantry pioneer units or friendly faction terrain features. So that one, as I understand it, would only affect your gun haulers. So no rend into your gun haulers is pretty awesome. So this is very movement based, these abilities, getting out, doing those. And the next one is Hostile Takeover. Once per turn per army at the end of any turn. Once again, you can only use this ability if you have not used any code abilities this turn, and if an enemy hero is destroyed by shooting attacks made by a friendly Pioneer unit this turn. The Pioneer units is just everybody in your army. In this Army of Renown, they all get the Pioneer keyword. For the rest of the battle, subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target friendly Pioneer units or friendly faction terrain features. So all of these are for the rest of the battle, which is super fun. And so you can kind of do one of these. There's 5 of them. You can do one per turn. So you kind of have to pick out which one you want to do, but then you get it for the rest of the battle. So if you were able to get this one really early in the game, being -1 to hit when someone's shooting at you is great. And then Market Dominance, once per turn per army at the end of any turn. You can only use this ability if you have not used any code abilities this turn, and if you control every objective that is not wholly within enemy territory. For the rest of the battle, each time you use your Zantari Endrin Dock's Endrin Works Outpost ability, you can set up a replacement auto Endrin on a manufacturing roll of 3 instead of 4. The Endrin Dock is going to be really important in this because you're just going to be throwing out auto Endrins, and if you can get them on 3s instead of 4s, this I imagine would be your turn 1 play, would be to try to get all the objectives that aren't wholly within enemy territory, and then you use this one so you're getting auto Endrins on 3s instead of 4s, and then you start shooting out as many auto Endrins as you can out into the world to go do mortals. Very fun stuff. The heroic traits, you have Copper Fingers. This is once per battle. It's a reaction when you declare the Endrin Works Outpost ability for a Zantari Endrin Dock. If this unit is wholly within 9 inches of that Endrin Dock, instead of resolving the effect of the Endrin Works Outpost ability, set up a replacement auto Endrin on the battlefield wholly within 6 inches of that Zantari Endrin Drakh and more than 3 inches from all enemy units. So you just get a free auto Endrin. And then Territorial Trailblazers, subtract 3 from the control scores of enemy units while they are in combat with this unit. That's probably the one I would take out of the 2 of them. The automatic Auto Endrin is nice, but I think the control score one is just better. And then Artifacts of Power. We've got Rockbuster Charges. Pick a terrain feature that this unit passed across this turn. Each enemy unit within 1 inch of that terrain feature is a target. Inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. So, as you're flying your gun haulers around, this is in your movement phase, by the way. As you're flying your gun haulers around, just make sure they barely pass terrain features that enemies are within 1 inch of, and they take D3 mortal damage. That's one. Thorgson's Universal Automaton Actuator. Add 6 inches to the move characteristic of friendly auto engines while they are wholly within 6 inches of this unit. That's probably the one I would do. I don't know. That one's like a flip of a coin. Whichever one you want to do more, go for it. This Army of Renown seems very much get all your movement set, figure out the order that you want to do each of the codes in, and then go fight. It sucks that you can't use the big boats, but you can take as many of the gun haulers as you want. And the gun haulers, I think, are really fun. They're a lot faster. They're 14-inch move instead of 10-inch move. So that's that first Army of Renown. The next one is the Magnet's Crew. Your roster options, you can take Brock, the Endrin Master and Dirigible Suit, the Knoll Chemist, Ironclad, the Frigate, the Gun Hauler, Von Grimm Salvagers, Von Grimm Harpoon Crew, Sky Wardens, Engine Riggers, and you cannot have Regiments of Renown or the Faction Terrain here. And so this Regiment of Renown, if your army does not include Brock Grungson, you can pick an Ironclad in your army to be the general instead of a hero. If you do that, the Ironclad gains the hero keyword. All of your units in this Army of Renown gain the Magnet's Crew keyword. So you can make your Ironclad a hero, which is kind of fun. So your battle traits, loyalty to the Magnet. While a friendly Brock Grunson is wholly within the combat range of another friendly Magnet's Crew infantry unit, both those units have a ward of 5+. This in and of itself is a reason to bring Brock. You get a 5-up ward save. And then pay your debts once per battle per army in the deployment phase. Pick an enemy unit on the battlefield or in reserve to be indebted. Add 1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by the friendly Magnet's Crew units that target the indebted unit. And so this is in the deployment phase, so you say, that guy owes us money, we hate that guy, we're +1 to wound on that guy, which is really strong because it can be any unit. It doesn't say a hero, it doesn't say a monster, it doesn't say an infantry. Like, you can pick any unit, so anything you think you need to kill, you pick that guy. And then bold moves, this is once per battle per army in your movement phase. Pick any number of friendly Magnet's Crew infantry units that are in combat to be the targets. Make an emergency launch roll of 3d6 for each target. Each target can move a distance up to the value of its emergency launch roll. It can move through the combat ranges of enemy units, but cannot end that move in combat with an enemy unit that was not in combat with at the start of the phase. The targets cannot use charge abilities for the rest of the turn. So you can't go tag new units, but anybody you were in combat with, you can. You can also, I'm assuming, leave the combat in. It does not say you must end in combat in general. If you are going to end in combat, you just have to stay in combat with the same units you were. You can't pick new ones. So that's kind of nice. And it's any number of infantry, so all of them can just get the heck out of there. They can't charge after that, but it also does not say they cannot shoot. So I think you could still shoot, you just couldn't charge. And then cutting edge Endrin packs, once per turn per army in your movement phase, pick up to D3 friendly Magnet's Crew infantry units that are wholly within 9 inches of a Magnet's Crew sky vessel to be the targets. Double the target's move characteristic for the rest of the turn. This is nice because it's once per turn, D3 units. So this gets you extra movement. You're dwarves, you're not fast. You're move 4 most of the time. So being able to be move 8 is excellent. And then some more battle traits. The Invictinite lined hull, once per battle per army in the enemy hero phase. Pick a friendly Magnet's Crew sky vessel to be the target. Roll a d3 for the rest of the turn. Subtract x from the Ren characteristic of attacks that target that sky vessel, where x is equal to the roll. So you can be possibly -3 rend, which is insane. Considering your boats are all on 2-up armor saves, any subtraction to rend, you're not going to touch that boat. So you pick a boat that you for sure do not want to die, and you can't touch it, essentially. And then Constant Barrage, this is once per turn per army in your shooting phase. Pick an enemy unit that had any damage points allocated to it this phase by a friendly Magnet's Crew unit's attacks to be the target until the start of your next turn. Each time the target ends a move within 10 inches of a friendly Magnet's Crew unit, roll a d3 on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. And that's once per turn per army. So you can do this every turn. And then if they get within 10 inches of any of your units, they take D3 2 plus mortals, which is pretty disgusting. So they have to stay away from you, or they just have to go all in. And then the heroic traits, Master of Discipline. Each time a friendly Magnets crew infantry unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit uses the redeploy command, you can reroll the dice. That's nice. It is just on the infantry, so you can't use it on the boat to get a bigger redeploy and take the guys with you like they normally do, unfortunately. And then flanking fire, add 1 to hit rolls for shooting attacks made by friendly Magnets crew sky vessels that target an enemy unit in combat with this unit. You give this to a hero that's going to be fighting, and everybody's +1 to hit shooting into that for sky. All the sky vessels at least are +1 to hit into that unit that it's in combat with, which is pretty awesome. So I'd probably take the flanking fire. The Master of Discipline is okay, but flanking fire I think is a little better. And then the artifacts of power, we have aerodynamism. If this unit moved this turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target this unit for the rest of the turn. So as long as it moved, it's just harder to hit. And that's all attacks. It's not just shooting. It's not just combat. It's all attacks. And then the other one is guns for all occasions. This is at the end of your turn. Pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit to be the target. Inflict D3 mortal damage on the target. I think being -1 to hit is awesome. I would say that's probably the move. And then the flanking fire is probably the heroic trait I would pick here. But I like this Army of Renown. It seems, I mean, the +1 to wound on a unit that you just get to pick at the beginning of the game is awesome. Getting to move your infantry a little faster. The D3 2-up mortals they get within 10 inches of you is just pretty cool. Granted, it has to have had taken damage from anybody, but you're going to do damage while you shoot. If you don't do damage in your shooting phase, then that's tough. That's unfortunate for you, probably. I think I like this Army of Renown as opposed to the other one, just because you can take the bigger boats. And you can take Brock in this one. Moving on, we're going to go to the Regiments of Renown now. The first one is Drecky's Privateers. So, here the little excerpt. Drecky Flint is one of the most famous Skyfarers in Kharadron society, a rogue and opportunist whose feats grow ever more outrageous in the telling. Captain of the frigate, the Ailsling, Flint has lent the services of his vessel and his crew to many causes over the years, few of them entirely noble. This can be included in cities of Sigmar, Daughters of Cain, Fire Slayers, Ideneth Deepkin, Lumineth Realm Lords, Ogre Maw Tribes, Seraphon, Stormcast Eternals, and Sylvaneth. It's all of the Order factions and the Ogres. And so you get Drecky Flint, you get 1 Arcanaut Frigate, which is the Ailsling, and 1 Arcanaut Company with 10 models. So the abilities you get with this regiment: cruising into position, this is in the deployment phase. Pick all units in this Regiment of Renown that have not been deployed. Set up all of those units in reserve, flying the winds. They have now been deployed. And then Daredevil deployment, this is in your movement phase. Pick the Arcanaut Frigate in this Regiment of Renown to use this ability if it is flying the winds. Set up the Arcanaut Frigate anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. Then set up the other units of this Regiment of Renown wholly within 6 inches of the frigate and more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So you can deep strike anywhere on the board outside of 9. Your guys have to be wholly within 6 outside of 9 of enemy units. And then you call it yours, I call it mine. Add 1 to hit rolls and wound rolls for shooting attacks made by units in this Regiment of Renown that target an enemy unit that is within 6 inches of an enemy unit that has an enhancement. So with that deep strike you can do, you say, where's your artifact of power? Where's your heroic trait? We're going to go take that. We like that. And then the good ship Ailsling. The Ailsling has a health characteristic of 17 instead of 15. So it's tanky too. On a 2-up save with 17 health, it's tough to take down. It almost has as much health as an Ironclad, which is absurd. But now we're going to move over to the Regiment of Renown that everybody's talking about, the Sky-Port Profiteers. The Kharadron Overlords are nothing if not pragmatic when it comes to defending their interests. The elite group known as the Sky-Port Profiteers are dispatched to seek allies and secure the most vital territories. Litigious code rights negotiate terms, ably backed up by the firepower of their Grunstock bodyguards. So, inclusion, this can go into cities of Sigmar, Daughters of Cain, Fire Slayers, Ideneth Deepkin, Lumineth Realm Lords, Ogre Maw Tribes, Osiarch Bone Reapers, Seraphon, Soulblight Gravelords, Stormcast Eternals, and Sylvaneth. So all of the Order factions plus Ogres OBR, and Gravelords. And so this Regiment of Renown comes with the code right, and then 2 units of 5 Thunderers. Their abilities, they each cost a command point. So the first one is Supplies Don't Come Cheap. It's in your hero phase. You spend a command point. You pick a visible terrain feature within 18 inches of the code right in this Regiment of Renown. Each friendly unit wholly within 3 inches of that terrain feature is a target. Roll a d3 for each target on a 2+. Heal X, where X is an amount equal to the roll. You can heal stuff for a command point. They just have to be wholly within 3 of a terrain feature is really tricky. So that one I don't know if you're going to use that much. It's going to be very situational, but it's really nice to be able to heal. And you heal each unit that's wholly within 3 inches of that terrain feature, D3 on a 2+. And then the next one is No One Rides for Free. This is in your movement phase. Once again, spending a command point, pick a friendly infantry unit with up to 10 models that is wholly within 9 inches of the code right in this Regiment of Renown and not in combat to be the target. Remove the target from the battlefield, then set it up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches from all enemy units. It's not a free teleport because it costs a command point, but as long as you have infantry that's wholly within 9 inches of the code right, spend that command point, they can teleport anywhere on the battlefield outside 9 of you. It's a really good way to get into the back line. One of my friends, Corey, has been playing Cities of Sigmar, and he's been trying to use this Regiment of Renown because he's castled up, and then with the code right, he's just able to throw things back there with Callus and Toll as well. It's really nasty. And then the long-range support, this is in your shooting phase. Once again, spending a command point. Pick an objective within 15 inches of the code right in this Regiment of Renown, and that no friendly units are contesting. Each unit contesting that objective is a target. Roll a dice for each target. If the roll exceeds the target's health characteristic, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. Yeah, you have to pick an objective that you don't have any units on. Each of your opponent's units that's on that objective takes mortals. So it's really good. The biggest thing I think with this Regiment of Renown, I mean, the teleport is really good in and of itself, but I think the thing that people are mostly looking at here is the Thunderers, because with their ability, you can turn off wards if you've done any damage. So you shoot with them first into whatever has a ward save, and then if you do damage, you have to roll higher than the control score of the target, but you add any damage that you did to it. So if you did if you do 5 damage into something, for the most part, you're turning off wards because most things don't have a control score of higher than 5. A lot of things, infantry has control score of 1. Most little foot heroes are 2. Monsters are 5. There's some that are bigger, right? But being able to turn off the ward save entirely with these guys and then go all in is really strong. So I think the Sky-Port Profiteers is something that we're going to see a lot, depending on how many points they are, if they go up in points, if they change some of these abilities here and there, which I don't think they will because that's a lot of work. I think we're going to see a lot of the Sky-Port Profiteers in competitive play. We're heading to the Las Vegas Open here in a couple weeks. I'm expecting to see, in the 5 games that I'll play there, I'm expecting to see these guys at least twice. So we'll see what actually happens. I just played in a tournament this past weekend, and nobody brought them. So who knows? But this is the one everybody's been talking about. Very strong, very good. Teleporting around, turning off ward saves. But that is a look at the Kharadron Overlords, Armies of Renown, and Regiments of Renown. If you haven't already, give us a like, give us a subscribe, comment if you play this army, what you've kind of been doing with it. Check out the army review for these guys that I did a couple days ago. Talk through all of the units, all of the abilities and everything. It's a very fun army. I'm excited to see these guys out on the board. I love the models. I love the boats. Very cool stuff. But thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.